A hurricane is wind, but at Category 5 strength, wind becomes something else entirely. At 175 miles per hour, it doesn't just damage structures, it systematically dismantles them. The atmospheric pressure drops 27 millibars in minutes. The wind no longer howls, it roars with a sustained frequency that human ears experience as a physical vibration in the chest cavity. It peels roofs from concrete in seconds, turns debris into ballistic projectiles traveling at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, and applies pressure loads reaching 15,000 pounds per square foot. Modern building codes are written for lower intensity storms, typically designed for sustained winds up to 130 miles per hour. When a storm pushes beyond what the code was written for, the structures fail catastrophically. Windows explode inward, walls buckle outward, roofs separate from their attachments and become airborne. The destruction is not accidental. It is physics executing inevitable consequences. Jack Mercer understood wind the way only someone trained in blast dynamics could understand it. During 7 years of active duty across 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, he had studied blast patterns in forensic detail. He had examined how pressure waves propagate through confined spaces at sub-millisecond velocities, how structures fail under forces that building codes had never contemplated. He had designed barriers and shelter systems to protect soldiers, calculating load paths and failure points with the kind of precision that determines whether a person lives or dies. His hands had traced the fracture patterns in concrete after explosions, understanding how pressure differentials work at the molecular level. This knowledge, earned under fire in 120-degree heat with dust coating every surface and the constant taste of gunpowder and concrete dust, had sharpened his judgment about civilian structures in ways no architecture degree could teach. He was 52 now, 12 years removed from active duty. His left leg carried a permanent reminder, an IED blast during his final tour that had nearly killed him. The explosion had occurred on a Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. 3 months in a military hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. 4 surgeries. 6 months of rehabilitation where he relearned how to walk, how to climb stairs, how to move without thinking about the pain. The limp was always there now, most noticeable on cold mornings when barometric pressure changes made the scar tissue ache. That injury had taught him something fundamental that no safety regulation could replicate. Survival is not about regulatory compliance or developer promises or expert certification. It is about understanding real forces and building accordingly, regardless of what codes permitted. Codes were written by committees. Physics cared nothing for committees. He spent the last 12 years building. His property sat on a slight rise, 5 miles inland from the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, positioned where storm surge wouldn't reach, but where hurricane-force winds would arrive with full velocity. 23 years ago, before the permanent limp, he had begun digging. $72,000 spent, 14 months of excavation, concrete pouring, steel reinforcement, every inch of the bunker built by his own hands or with his own direction and verification. He had mixed the concrete himself to ensure the aggregate ratios met specifications. He had personally inspected every steel beam before it went into place, running his hands along the surfaces, feeling for defects, measuring with tools. Ranger, his Belgian Malinois, had been with him throughout, a working partner, not a pet. The dog had become a detection system designed to sense threats and pressure changes that humans could not perceive. Ranger could alert to weather shifts 6 to 8 hours before meteorologists predicted them. The dog's inner ear, more sensitive to pressure changes than any human sense organ, could detect drops of only 2 millibars, the beginning of a hurricane system still 3 days away. By late August each year, together they walked the property each morning, monitoring weather patterns and testing every system. Jack would stand with his hand on the bunker's air intake, feeling the pressure differential, watching how Ranger's ears would shift slightly when the pressure began to change. The bunker was 28 feet deep, accessed by a sloped entrance tunnel angled at 37 degrees to prevent pressure differential failure. Triple reinforced concrete with a steel frame skeleton rated for forces exceeding modern hurricane specs by 40%. Walls 5 feet thick at the base, tapering to 3 feet above, with internal bracing every 4 feet. The concrete contained 7,000 pounds of rebar per cubic yard, double the standard residential specification. Walls 5 feet thick could withstand 15,000 pounds per square foot of pressure. The entry doors were triple-sealed blast doors sourced from a decommissioned military facility, engineered for pressure differentials that modern civilian structures never accounted for. The doors opened inward first, then outward, creating 3 distinct seal points. Inside, living quarters capable of housing 30 people comfortably, 5,000 gallons of water storage in food-grade polyethylene drums with a gravity-fed distribution system, 3 months of food supplies organized on steel shelving, emergency medical equipment including surgical supplies and trauma medications, a diesel generator with sound dampening enclosure, HEPA filtration system with manual backup, and a manual hand pump system for water distribution if power failed. The ceiling was reinforced I-beams rated for 40,000 pounds of distributed load, cross-braced with structural steel. The entrance had a right-angle turn to prevent pressure differential failure, the most common point of structural collapse in underground bunkers during extreme pressure events. Every specification calculated to 3 decimal places. Every measurement verified twice during construction. This was engineering applied with the precision of life-or-death military work, the kind that had kept soldiers alive under fire. Brad Whitmore was a developer building a subdivision 3 miles away, upwind of Jack's location. He had mocked Jack's bunker at county planning meetings several years earlier, speaking with the confidence of someone who had passed licensing exams and received professional certifications. Modern construction is designed by experts with advanced degrees, Whitmore had declared, his voice carrying the tone of someone accustomed to being right. This paranoid bunker mentality holds communities back from development and progress. The days of World War II thinking are over. Whitmore's Coastal Heights subdivision featured contemporary design, open floor plans with minimal load-bearing walls, cathedral ceilings with large windows, curved roof lines optimized for aesthetic appearance, built to code, certified by licensed professional engineers, developer bonded and insured. From a regulatory perspective, Whitmore was absolutely correct. The designs met every applicable building code. The engineer's stamp was legitimate. The certifications were current. From a physics perspective, Jack understood something else entirely. Forces do not care about developer credentials or code compliance or professional certifications. They apply themselves according to the laws of physics without consideration for human authority or regulatory frameworks. Wind at 175 miles per hour exerts force according to the equations that govern fluid dynamics, indifferent to whatever licensing body signed off on the structure below. In late September, the National Hurricane Center tracked a system moving west from Africa, Hurricane Meridian. By the Caribbean, It was Category 4, with wind speeds approaching 140 miles per hour. The system continued to intensify, rapidly intensifying. By the time it reached the Yucatan, it was Category 5, with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour and barometric pressure of 901 millibars. Meteorologists predicted it would maintain or strengthen before Gulf Coast landfall. Brad Whitmore sent emails to Coastal Heights homeowners, his tone reassuring and authoritative. This is exactly what modern building code was designed for. Our homes are certified for Category 4 and strong Category 5 conditions. Our certification is valid and verified. You should remain confident in your investment. Jack heard about these emails indirectly from Margaret Chen, who lived 2 properties south and had come by asking whether the bunker could shelter additional families. Old Robert Vasquez, who had owned land in the area for 40 years and had survived Hurricane Camille in 1969, had recognized the bunker construction during its final phases and had kept Jack's number. Within hours of the hurricane strengthening to Category 5, Jack found himself receiving calls from 7 different families. The bunker could hold 9 families safely, 24 people, including children. Jack gave them all his location and a simple message. If the hurricane strengthened further or the forecast cone shifted, he would call them. They should be ready to come immediately. September 28th, 11 p.m. Ranger's behavior changed in ways that a typical pet owner would have missed. The Belgian Malinois, trained for 17 different alert signals during his military service years, became intensely focused on the window facing south-southeast, the direction from which the hurricane would arrive. His ears stood vertically upright, forward pointing. His body became rigid. The dog began pacing in a figure-8 pattern, a specific indicator that the dog's inner ear was sensing pressure changes occurring in real time. Jack's commercial barometer on the wall had dropped only 3 millibars in the past hour, but Ranger was sensing something more. Perhaps the dog's ear was registering pressure changes at frequencies below what electronic instruments measured. Jack turned on the Weather Channel. Hurricane Meridian had intensified. Sustained wind now 150 miles per hour. Gusts predicted to exceed 165. The forecast cone now included Jack's location directly in the path of the eye, the worst possible position, guaranteeing the full force of the storm's rotation. Jack reached for his phone and made 7 calls, his voice calm and direct. Everyone answered on the first ring. They had been monitoring weather too. He said only, "Come now, bring what matters. I'll wait 30 minutes." They came quickly. Margaret Chen arrived with 2 daughters, car packed. Robert Vasquez with his wife and grandson. A young family named Harding with 4 children. Another family, the Delgados, with elderly parents. By midnight, 9 families, 24 people total, including 7 children, had descended into the bunker. Jack walked through each room with them, showing them the water supply, the bathroom facilities where food was stored. He was quiet, methodical, asking no one questions but making sure everyone understood the layout. Ranger moved with them, the dog's presence somehow reassuring to the children despite the approaching storm. Wind at 175 miles per hour is not a howl. It is a continuous roar, a sound frequency so low and sustained that it bypasses the human ear and registers directly in the bones and chest cavity. Above ground at Jack's property, it obliterated everything in its path. Trees snapped like toothpicks, oak trees with trunks 3 feet in diameter, bent, twisted, and separated. Power lines were torn from moorings and tangled into impossible knots across the devastated landscape. Jack's unprotected structures, garage, storage shed, workshop, were destroyed completely. The wind peeled his garage roof away like opening a tin can, exposing the interior to the elements. In the bunker, 80 feet below ground and sealed behind 3 sets of blast doors, the sound was muted by nearly 4 feet of concrete and steel. It emerged as a dull, distant throb, present, acknowledged, but not overwhelming. Ranger remained alert through the storm's 16-hour assault, the dog's senses tracking the wind speed and pressure changes with an awareness that animals possess and humans lack. His ears rotated constantly, catching frequencies that the dog had been trained to recognize. When the maximum pressure waves hit, the moment when the storm's eye passed directly overhead and the pressure differential was most extreme, the dog pressed firmly against Jack's leg, his body temperature elevated, his muscles tense. Jack kept his hand on the dog's back, a gesture that was as much for his own reassurance as for Ranger's. The reinforced ceiling held. The triple-sealed doors remained perfectly secure, with no vibration, no movement, no sound of strain. The structure did not move. The sound continued for 16 hours, 4 in the afternoon through the night, until just past 8 the next morning. When Jack and Ranger ascended in the morning, the scale of devastation was almost incomprehensible. Every tree within a 2-mile radius was either completely snapped at the mid-trunk or debarked entirely, the wood bleached white and skeletal. Power lines tangled the ground in a metallic web. Jack's unprotected outbuildings were gone completely, not damaged, not partially destroyed, but gone. The concrete foundation pads remained, but the structures themselves had been erased. But the bunker entrance remained intact. The reinforced frame around the doors showed no damage, no strain, no deformation. The doors sealed perfectly as they opened, the hydraulic system functioning as designed, the pressurized cylinders extending with the same smooth operation they had displayed during testing a month earlier. Every engineered detail performed as calculated. The people inside, 24 individuals including 7 children, had slept safely while the wind obliterated everything outside. Jack had been vindicated, though he had never sought vindication. The knowledge he had gained in combat zones, sharpened by military engineering training, had proven accurate in the civilian world. The forces he had designed for had arrived, and the design had held. Jack drove to Coastal Heights that morning, with Ranger in the truck bed. The devastation there was almost beautiful in its systematic nature. Whitmore's homes, modern, code-compliant, built by licensed developers and certified by professional engineers, had been systematically dismantled by forces that the code had never been designed to withstand. Roofs were missing from 15 homes. Wind hadn't removed them partially. They were completely gone, sometimes leaving only the frame of the structure. Walls had collapsed on 8 others, sometimes on the leeward side where pressure differential had created suction forces. 2 homes had been cut cleanly in half by fallen trees that had snapped like matchsticks. 1 tree had penetrated completely through a house, entering through the front wall and exiting through the back. The subdivision was a landscape of structural failure. Whitmore's pride in code compliance had meant nothing. The wind had not cared about his engineering certifications or his developer credentials. It had simply applied force, 175 miles per hour of sustained wind pressure, gusts exceeding 190 miles per hour, and the structures could not withstand it. The code had been insufficient. The experts had been wrong. By Tuesday evening, a different story was emerging across local news. News helicopters had filmed the devastated Coastal Heights subdivision. And then, 3 miles away, they had filmed something else. 9 families emerging from underground, ascending into daylight after 16 hours sheltering in Jack's bunker. They came up blinking in the morning sun. Margaret Chen supporting her elderly mother, Robert Vasquez with his grandson riding on his shoulders, the Harding family with their 4 children, all of them emerging without a single injury. Their homes had been destroyed, possessions lost, but they and their children had survived when everyone had assumed they would not. A reporter interviewed one of the teenagers, a 16-year-old girl from the Harding family. She described what it felt like, the sound muted by concrete and steel, the structure utterly stable and unmoving, the knowing that they were protected by engineering that actually worked. She said, "I was scared when we went down, but Jack had thought through everything. The water was there, the food was there, the air was fresh. I fell asleep in a room underground and woke up safe. That's not luck, that's engineering." Jack had never sought credit. He had simply invited people when the warning came. Ranger had been instrumental in alerting him to danger hours before the official warnings, the dog's pressure change detection giving them crucial additional hours to prepare and descend safely into shelter. Brad Whitmore appeared on local news 3 days later to discuss rebuilding. He spoke about building codes and the importance of regulatory standards. But the visual behind him was inescapable. Devastated coastal heights, row after row of destroyed modern homes. That footage was then juxtaposed with Jack's bunker entrance, still standing, still intact, and families emerging into daylight after 16 hours underground. The national narrative had shifted in an instant. The code had proven insufficient. The experts had been wrong. Overnight, Jack Mercer, the man Whitmore had mocked years earlier for his paranoid bunker mentality, had become the person who had saved 9 families when modern construction failed catastrophically. 6 weeks later, the county zoning board reconvened to discuss coastal construction standards. Jack attended, sitting quietly in the back of the room, Ranger in his service vest beside him. Brad Whitmore did not attend. He was managing insurance claims and lawsuits, his reputation damaged beyond repair. A board member asked about structural resilience and whether current code specifications were adequate. Jack stood when asked. He spoke about blast dynamics and pressure differential failure modes, the way structures collapse when internal pressure exceeds external pressure or vice versa. He spoke about the difference between code compliance and genuine protection. He explained load path analysis and force transmission through materials. He described the engineering specifications of his bunker, not in a boastful way, but methodically, like a man presenting facts. He did not mention Brad Whitmore by name. He did not need to. The visual evidence was already in people's minds. The news footage had shown everything necessary. Within months, 2 more bunkers were under construction, one built by a retired contractor who had seen Jack's success, another financed by a group of families who pooled resources. Within a year, Jack had consulted on 7 more reinforced structures. The Army Corps of Engineers contacted him about his design methodology, asking for his calculations and engineering specifications. Universities reached out, asking if he would speak to engineering students about real-world structural performance. His engineer's eye, sharpened by 3 combat tours and a permanent limp from an IED blast, had proven more accurate than developers and architects who held licenses and certifications, but had never tested their designs against forces approaching what actually existed in nature. Recognition had come not through seeking it, not through marketing or self-promotion, but through performance. The structures he had designed had performed when modern code-compliant structures had failed. Jack's story is not about paranoia or fear. It is about applying knowledge earned under fire to the civilian world. It is about understanding structural failure not as abstract code requirement or regulatory checkpoint, but as tangible force that either kills or preserves. A Category 5 hurricane applies real forces. Those forces either break structures or they do not. Ranger had detected the pressure change hours before warnings came, providing crucial time for families to shelter. The bunker had protected 9 families when modern construction had failed catastrophically. Vindication came not through argument or certification or regulatory approval. It came through structural performance. It came through the fact that 9 families walked out alive. If you're interested in learning more about survival engineering, disaster-resistant structures, or how military design principles can protect your family and property, we have resources on our channel specifically focused on these methods and applications. Jack's bunker has become a case study in what works, not in theory, but in practice, tested against actual forces. The destroyed Coastal Heights subdivision became a case study in what doesn't work, despite code compliance and professional certification. The difference between them was not luck or chance or divine intervention. It was knowing the forces that matter, understanding how structures fail, and building accordingly. That knowledge is available. The choice is yours.